Hey guys, this is Jake with Cohesive Friendship Unit, just me today. I wanted to try something a little different for us and see if I could bring you a Risk of Rain 2 multiplayer survivor guide. As you guys know, here at CFU, we absolutely love Risk of Rain 2, the latest Hapu roguelike game, and we've been playing it a bunch. We put out a ton of content on it, and you guys have all really loved that so far, so I figured I would bring you guys a multiplayer focused survivor guide that can hopefully help you figure out how to best play these characters in a multiplayer setting with your friends. Now, I think the multiplayer part of Risk of Rain 2 is part of what makes the game so fun, and I think there's a huge difference between playing the game in multiplayer versus playing solo, where you just are going to go grab everything on the map. So, these guides will pretty much focus exclusively on how to play these characters in a multiplayer setting. So with all of that being said, let's hop right into our first Risk of Rain 2 multiplayer guide by starting things off with a Rex guide. I think Rex is probably one of the most interesting characters that we have in Risk of Rain 2, and that's because he has some of the best damage potential in the game, but he also has one of the least survivable characters in the game because you are constantly dealing damage to yourself. Additionally, after the most recent patch, which nerfed health regeneration on Monsoon and normal difficulty, Rex has really fallen off since he's so reliant on healing and health regeneration. But I think he can still really kill it in the multiplayer Monsoon games, especially if you have a good team that's helping you out, and even more, especially if you have an engineer on your team. Rex really has a hard time in the early game, but with a good team, you can get through there and really deal that late game damage that Rex needs to do. So without further ado, let's hop right into the Rex multiplayer guide. I'm going to go over a couple sections in this guide, starting with some general multiplayer tips, heading into some Rex specific strategies and tips, and finally ending with a quick item tier list. I'll drop some timestamps down in the description of this video, that way you guys can jump around and come back and reference specific sections if you want. Alright, let's start off with the multiplayer tips. Now, the name of the game in a multiplayer Risk of Rain match is spreading items effectively. Unlike in a solo game where you are just going to go around, grab every single item you see, you really want to make sure that everyone on your team balances items effectively. And that's something you would think might be pretty easy to do, but not all characters move the same speed. So if everyone is at the same level of play, someone that's playing the engineer versus the huntress, for example, is not going to get as many items because huntress is going to be able to move around the map significantly faster than engineer. So it is key to keep everyone on your team at the same level, and that serves two purposes. One, it's not fun if you keep dying at the beginning of every single match and you're relying on one super powerful character to keep you in the game, but additionally, all it really takes is one late game Malachite Minor Wisp shot to knock out your chances. So balance your characters' power levels, that way if one person dies, you can still make it through the boss fight in a reasonable amount of time. Now, beyond balancing just the amount of items that you have, you want to balance not only the items that you get, but also the equipment you get. So starting with equipment, it's important to make sure that you guys don't really duplicate equipment that much. For example, Primordial Cube is one of the best equipments in the game, but you really don't need 4 of them. You can really get away with maybe one person with a fuel cell or maybe 2 cubes, and then have everyone else take some damage equipment. So keep that in mind, that you don't need to repeat equipment that much. Just coordinate with your team on when best to use them, and more importantly, give items to the correct characters once you get them. For example, if you have an engineer and you come across a bustling fungus, give it to them. Give them that item because they need it. It's not really an effective item with anyone else. And it's important to share those items even if you buy it. So if you're playing Rex, you come across a fungus or some other item, say attack speed, give that to the character on your team that can most effectively use that. When I'm playing with the guys at CFU, we'll often buy chests for each other depending on who has enough money, what items we already have, etc. Just find whatever system works for your group. As long as the right items get to the right characters, you guys are good. And this goes for everything from common items to legendaries, and it also applies for effectively stacking items. It may be better for your team to stack 4 old guillotines on one main damage dealing character rather than giving one to everyone because of how the item scales. Now, moving into the Rex specific tips, one of the most important things that I learned when playing Rex is that all of Rex's abilities work off percentage health. So normally you would think getting something like Infusion would really help Rex because that gives you extra health and Rex is constantly dealing damage to himself, but that is not really the case because all of your abilities do percentage damage. So even if you have 5,000 health, you're still going to do the same percent damage to yourself. And you can really take advantage of that by, one, spreading the health items to members of your team. Obviously, it helps to have a large health pool, especially as you get into a late game, but you don't really need as much health as everyone else because you really are relying on your healing to bring you back to the top quickly. That also opens you up to use items like Shaped Glass pretty effectively because your damaging abilities are just going to do slightly less damage to you because you have a smaller health pool. Now, ignoring the entire drama of Shaped Glass and how it might be a little bit overpowered, I can recommend grabbing maybe one of these because your damage is going to double and you can still pretty effectively heal yourself as long as you're constantly moving and avoiding big hits. And as I just said, avoiding big hits is one of the key things to keep in mind when playing Rex. Because you can't really benefit from one-shot protection since you are always going to be under 100% health, you really need to build some movement speed to keep yourself moving, avoid getting shotgunned by the lizards or by the greater wisps because you can't really rely on that one-shot protection that protects most other characters in the game. So movement speed can really go a long way. Be sure that your space button is really greased up and ready to go because you should be hitting that constantly while you're playing. And Rex's 3 ability is a slight push, which you can use for a little bit extra movement speed. It doesn't send you very far, but occasionally that can be enough to avoid a big hit, a killer hit. So just use all the abilities you have to the best of their ability to keep yourself on the move and avoiding damage. Now, for items and how I like to build Rex, my main focus and my preferred build is critical hit. Rex doesn't really benefit from attack speed like some of the other characters like the robot, so really build Rex like you would build Artificer. Focus on critical hits. Rex's 2 does 450% damage on hit, and that's at base. You send that out just about every second. So if you have something like Ocular HUD or you just have a lot of critical glasses, you are going to be dealing a ton of damage because you can send that out very, very quickly. I do like to bring on maybe 1 or 2 backup magazines, but that really depends on how good your healing is and how effectively you're balancing your 1 and your 2 abilities. So crit is really the best way to build Rex, in my opinion. I think that's probably not surprising because there's not too many ways to build characters in this game, but try and prioritize crit if you can, since a lot of characters like to build crit in this game. Alright, moving into the last section, and probably the most important section in my opinion, is the item guide. And as I mentioned earlier on in the video, one of the most important parts about playing Risk of Rain 2 in a multiplayer setting is spreading items effectively. And the only way you can really spread items effectively is if you know what items are good for your character and what items are good for other characters. So I'm going to structure this item guide by starting out with some priority items. Now these are items that if they drop, they need to go to Rex. No matter what, end of story, these need to go to Rex, no matter who opens them up. Then I'm going to hit on some good items that really, really help Rex, but maybe they're not something that necessarily needs to go to Rex, or they're good for pretty much every character, so they kind of go to anyone. So starting out, let's talk about the priority items that have to absolutely go to Rex if they drop on the map. First and foremost, Rejuvenation Rack. Now, Rejuvenation Rack needs to go to Rex because it increases your healing. and Rex needs healing. It's as simple as that. 100% increase to your health stacking as you pick up more means your healing abilities are going to heal you twice as fast, and that is pretty much going to make Rex unstoppable. I have played Rex with and without Rejuvenation Rack, and the difference is it's unbelievable. Rejuvenation Rack, best item that Rex can get. Again, if that drops anywhere, regardless of who opens it up, even though it's a legendary, this needs to go to Rex because you can pump out significantly more damage. You can stack more backup magazines, which will let you send out more and more seed barrages, which will just infinitely increase your damage. The other item that really needs to go to Rex if it drops on the map is Aegis, and in a lesser sense, Topaz Brooch. Aegis got a bit of a buff in the last patch, so it heals a little bit better. It'll grant you a temporary health barrier of 50%, stacking on that 50% for the amount you healed. And this really helps only Rex and I would say Engineer's turrets, because these are the only two characters that can effectively and constantly heal themselves. So no one else can really benefit from Aegis except for Rex. Whereas Topaz Brooch is extremely effective for Rex, but it's also really effective for anyone else. So I can't give it a high priority item because almost everyone can benefit from Topaz Brooch. So really focus on, if Aegis drops, Rex gets that. Focus on getting all the Topaz Brooches. If you find a Topaz printer, print yourself a handful of those. They are not the end all be all because they really only heal you or they give you a 15 health barrier, which is not a ton, and you have to stack quite a few to get up to something that really is going to matter in the late game. Whereas Aegis is, again, really only effective for Rex and for Engineer's turrets, and I would not recommend giving Engineer those items because it just benefits the turrets. Other really good items that kind of benefit more than one character, Strides of Heresy. I think this one's probably going to be the most controversial item on my item list, but this will replace your utility skill with the Shadow Fade skill, which lets you go invisible and heal while you're in there for 3 seconds. This is going to replace Rex's Directive Disperse ability, which is his shift, slight little push or dash if you're jumping. I don't love Rex's shift ability, so I don't have any problem replacing it with Shadow Fade. And any ability that will give you healing and invincibility for any sort of time, I think is fantastic, especially for Rex, where survivability is key, and he kind of suffers in the survivability category. So if you find a Strides of Heresy, I think this first priority should go to Rex. After that, there's a couple other characters that could benefit from it. I don't think there's any reason not to pick this up. I don't love the stacking. At the base, it lasts for 3 seconds, and it stacks 3 seconds additional every time you get one. So I don't love that. 6 seconds is a long time. So just pick up one of these if you have the option, especially if you're going to the Bazaar Between Time. The final item, I was debating putting this in the good items, but Tougher Times is a fantastic item for Rex. You are constantly dealing damage to yourself, so any chance to not deal damage to yourself is going to go a long way. Obviously, everyone can benefit from Tougher Times. This is the end-all be-all for survivability and Risk of Rain, so anyone can benefit from this item, but especially Rex benefits because you are constantly dealing damage to yourself, and you don't benefit from one-shot protection. So any opportunity to block any sort of damage is fantastic. So I recommend building probably 5 to 7 teddies. Once you pass the 6 or 7 teddy mark, that gives you about 50% chance to block incoming damage, so it makes a huge difference having that many. If you come across, say, a teddy bear printer, Tougher Times printer, I would definitely trade 7 common items to get 7 teddy bears. It makes a world of difference when you're playing Rex. So those were the priority items, again, items that absolutely need to go to Rex because they are that good. Moving on to the good items that really benefit Rex are fantastic pickups, but very often are fantastic pickups for everyone, so I can't say these need to go to Rex over anyone else because that wouldn't be fair to the rest of your team. Starting out, I'm probably going to say this one wrong, but Nakuhana's Opinion. This is the little antlers that shoot skulls when you heal. Obviously Rex is healing almost all the time, so this is a fantastic item for Rex, but the only reason it did not make it into the priority items section is because I honestly think this item is much better on engineers, and here's why. Rex, you are constantly moving around because you are very, very, very not survivable. So you're not always in range of enemies because you actually have really good range on your abilities. So you do a better job of surviving the farther away you are from enemies, especially during a boss fight, which means you're often not in range to shoot out those skulls. Whereas an engineer's turret, if they have even one fungus, they are constantly healing, which means they are constantly sending out these healing skulls or these damaging skulls when they're healing. And there's two of them, which is twice as good as having one Rex healing whenever your healing ability is out. So it does take a little bit of practice. Your engineer has to be very conscious when they put their turrets down to get the healing skulls to do the most damage. But it's good for both Rex and for engineer. I would prioritize giving this item to your engineer over Rex. But overall, you can't really go wrong with giving it to either Rex or your engineer. Another great item, or in this case actually a great equipment item, is Primordial Cube. Again, this benefits absolutely everyone on the team. I think this is the best equipment in the game, which is why it is in the good category, because anyone can pick this up and benefit the team. But this item scales very, very well into late game because it procs a ton on hit and on death item effects. This item is even better for Rex because all of Rex's abilities do AoE damage, and your Seed Barrage and your Tangling Roots just become that much better the more items that are grouped up, the more enemies that are grouped up. So really having anyone on your team with this item is all you need, as long as you can coordinate with your team as to when to drop it and where to drop it. That makes all the difference. When I'm playing with the CFU guys, we usually ping a location on the map or drop it at the feet of the boss. That way you can get all those on-hit effects off the boss. And we'll tell each other when we're going to drop it. That way we can prioritize and maximize the amount of damage that we get on our abilities. Another good item for Rex, which really again benefits everyone, but I think is better for Rex more than anyone else, is the Sentient Meat Hook. This acts as kind of a mini cube on hit, and again, anything that groups up enemies helps Rex with his healing and his damage. The grouping is not as good as cube, so I wouldn't say this is a must-have item. It's really good for anyone, and the grouping is not strong enough to make it something that Rex needs to prioritize getting. The final item in the good category that I think Rex can benefit from, which most survivors in Risk of Rain 2 do not benefit from as much, is Medkit. And the reason Medkit gets a shout out in this guide versus all the other healing items is because this item procs specifically off of damage. And since Rex is a huge masochist, he's constantly dealing damage to himself with all of his abilities. Not to mention the damage you are receiving from enemies themselves. So you are getting a lot of bang for your buck for Medkit, especially if you stack a couple of these. It can help more than any of the other items. Things like Cautious Slug can be good, but that requires you to leave the action long enough to get a benefit from that. So if I have the choice between a handful of healing items, say in like a multi-pick terminal, I'm going to prioritize grabbing Medkit just because it helps with healing, and it still lets me play Rex the way I want to, which is constantly moving around. Yes, it helps a lot in the early game, especially if you find a printer, but in the late game it's going to drop off. Once your health pool starts to approach kind of like the 800 plus mark, healing 10 or so on hit is not going to make a difference, and it's not going to help you survive any damage from any of the late game characters. So this is really an early game priority item, which is why it is in the good category, because it falls off so heavily as you get to the end game. Now, the bonus section for you guys is items that I would absolutely never, ever, ever, ever pick up as Rex. These are just a couple of shoutouts that, in general, are not great items in the game, but if you pick them up as Rex, you're pretty much killing your run right then and there. Starting out, Transcendence and Wake of Vultures, never grab these as Rex. I don't really recommend them as any character, but specifically Rex, they are very bad, because Transcendence will convert all of your health but one to shields, and Wake of Vultures, you can pick up the healing ability, the shield ability from elites, which will convert half of your health to shields. Wake of Vultures can be really bad because converting half of your health to shields when you're not expecting it will kill you very, very quickly. Transcendence, not great either because you can't really benefit from any of your healing abilities, so I would not recommend either of these items. They are absolutely awful for Rex. They are also really bad for most characters in the game, so in general, I would avoid picking these up. And Corpse Bloom is the other item I would avoid picking up, and this one can be a little deceptive because it looks like a healing item, but the text is kind of deceiving. This item will heal you for 100% more, which sounds good, but all the healing is applied over time. And if you do out the math, which you can kind of see demonstrated on some of the Risk of Rain 2 wikis, your healing is going to be reduced to your max healing plus a certain percentage. So, long story short, this is going to end up reducing your healing, and as Rex, especially as you get into the late game, you're looking for that constant burst healing, not healing over time. You will always be able to do more damage to yourself just sending out your abilities than you can heal up using Corpse Bloom. So never pick this up because you are never going to get ahead of the amount of damage that you are taking in. So these are all items that you absolutely should never pick up as Rex because they are going to tank your run. And again, I really don't recommend any of these items for any characters in Risk of Rain. And that just about wraps up the Rex multiplayer guide. This is by no means a comprehensive guide to how to play Rex. I was trying to keep it a little short for you guys, since this is a YouTube video after all. Hopefully you find the item guide pretty helpful, and let me know down in the comments if there are any other items that you like to pick up as Rex, and how you like to build Rex yourself. If there's anything you want to add, let me know down there. I'll be sure to read those and respond to all the comments that you guys give. Hopefully you guys find this content pretty helpful. If so, I will try and get out some more of these guides for you. One of the next characters I'm looking at is Engineer because he is pretty easy to play, but I think he is hard to master and really get the most out of. So let me know if you guys want to see some more of these multiplayer guides, and I will be sure to get them out. Let me know what characters you want to hear about, and I will focus on those. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. That helps us keep putting out this content that you guys all love, and we do giveaways constantly on this channel about every 500 subs. So if you want to get entered in to win any of our giveaways, be sure to subscribe to our channel, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks everyone.